Program. It is hour number 2 on a Monday afternoon, and today is Political Debate Day, the first debate we've done in this season. So welcome. Hopefully you're going to learn something today. This is between the two candidates for the 11th Bristol District, both Democrats, the incumbent Robert Koczera and the challenger Chris Hendricks. Whoever wins on September 4th in the primary will go on to be the next representative from the 11th Bristol District, as there is no Republican challenger. So we flipped a coin just before, during the news, just before we came back on the air, and Representative Koczera won the coin flip, so that means you would like to offer your challenger the first opening statement.
Yes.
All right. So, Mr. Hendricks, you've got a minute to do your opening statement.
Thank you very much. So, first of all, before I get started, I just want to thank WBSM. I want to thank you, Barry, and Jim Phillips for organizing this this debate over the airwaves. I think we're doing a great service for the people of the 11th Bristol, who have for far too long not heard from the state representative leadership at the State House. So I think we're doing a great service for the citizens of New Bedford and Acushnet. So a little about me. My name's Chris Hendricks. I'm a candidate for this office of the 11th Bristol. I was born and raised in New Bedford. I attended all New Bedford public schools growing up. I played baseball down at Clegg Field for quite some time growing up as a child. Graduated from New Bedford High in 2001. I worked in many capacities in and around the city. I've worked as a bartender for many years down at Cork. I was part of the revitalization of the downtown, which was an exciting period around the 2006 area when Cork was first open. So I'm advocating for stronger leadership. I think we have a dangerous lack of leadership right now, considering the issues that we face. And
thank you, Mr. Hendricks. Let's switch it over now to Representative Koczera. Go ahead. You go in a minute now.
You know me. No, I am one of you. I was president of the local Lions Club, coached my daughter in youth soccer, did coop duty with other parents at the Bay State girls softball. I was the first 18-year-old member of the JCs. I have a record of involvement and volunteer service to our community. You can't measure the abilities of my opponent to serve you. He has not been involved volunteering service to our community. I have seen positive changes in our community. I have been a part of them. State investment in State Pier and a terminal for offshore wind energy, arts funding for AHAR and the Z. I'm working for early education programs and fighting to expand senior programs. My opponent can do nothing. He can point to nothing he's done serving our community. That's why he's attacking me, to discredit my reputation and service. He is throwing away the rule book. He will say and do anything to get elected. I have always acted for the people, not myself. The same cannot be said about my opponent.
All right, Representative Koczera, from this point we proceed into the questions and answers, and each candidate will be asked a question. You'll have 2 minutes to answer it. Your opponent will then be given 2 minutes to answer it, and then the person to whom the question was first posed will get a minute to rebut, and then we'll just continue in that fashion right up until we either fall over or the hour runs out, whatever happens next. So,
very good.
Mr. Koczera, you do get the first question. I want to ask you about Sanctuary State, because that's very important in this. Right now we saw the budget delayed by almost 2 weeks, and a big part of that was because of the debate over sanctuary state status, a piece of legislation or an amendment in the Senate. The House did not support similar legislation last year, although there is support growing for it. What is your thought about sanctuary state status for Massachusetts, and to what extent should the police be working with federal immigration officials in Massachusetts?
The budget was not the piece of legislation that we should have taken up that matter with. It should be fully debated. I would point out that not a single municipal law enforcement agency signed a 287G agreement with the federal government. I think that speaks to local police knowing the value of good relations with immigrant communities, and the fact that 287G agreements don't have any federal funding to provide for such activities. So local police have responsibilities for public safety. I would have joined my colleagues, Senators Rodericks and Pacheco, in voting against what was proposed by the Senate, even though I do oppose the 287G program, because there's no funding, and that's just putting more of a burden on local police budgets and state funding. So that's my position on that.
Mr. Hendricks, I'd like to respond in 2 minutes.
Absolutely. So with regard to the sanctuary state question, should Massachusetts be a sanctuary state? I think codifying lack of cooperation with federal authorities isn't the way to go. I think, immigration is a federal issue, and for states to get involved as a constitutional matter, I think with that level is improper. So I think we can have compassion. We can have an understanding that there are criminals and there are people who come here to work. And I think making that differentiation between the two groups of people is vitally important. Massachusetts already has a dangerous lack of resources in towns and municipalities already. So to give some of those resources that we're already lacking to the federal government, particularly when they're rounding up immigrants the way they are now, I think it would be in the wrong direction for Massachusetts. And I think, as I've said in the past, I've represented migrant workers at the CCT clinic in the North End, people who have been disparaged for doing nothing but trying to get here to help their family, hardworking group of people, and I want to see that community strengthened and not weakened. So I think codifying Massachusetts as a sanctuary state is the wrong way to go. We can cooperate with the federal authorities with certain matters, but helping them round up immigrants without due process of law or round up their citizens' children at the border, I think is the wrong way to go.
All right, Mr. Koczera, Representative Koczera, you got a minute to respond to that if you'd like.
My position remains the same, that I think that the proper place to take up this matter would be in a full-fledged bill, and that I think that our resources are already strained, and that there's no need to go down that route, that law enforcement knows what they should be doing to protect all the people that are residing within a community.
All right, next question goes to Mr. Hendricks, and I'm going to stay on this topic. This is a 2-minute, you get 2 minutes to answer this, and both of you gentlemen are talking about expenses to local police departments, and I don't think my listeners get that. I think what we're talking about here is an effort for local authorities to work cooperatively with county and state and, if necessary, federal officials in keeping their streets and their communities safe. They don't want folks who are here illegally with criminal records to be released on the street. So we're not talking about, at least not what I'm talking about, is any additional expense to local police departments by having the local police work cooperatively. We're not asking for local police to take on the responsibility of federal ICE officials, just to work cooperatively and share information. And is that something you find problematic?
Well, I do. So when you have any type of cooperation from the municipalities and towns, there's going to be a drain on resources, whether it be time, but by each individual in the local municipality, or time away from doing their duties on the local level with the matters that are important in the community already. So to drain resources again from the local municipalities is just not the way to go for people who come here to work. Listen, illegal immigrants, there's a lot of illegal immigrants throughout this country. I believe it's like 11 million, okay? And not all of them come here to kill people or cause crime or get in trouble or get DUIs. A large share of them come here to work hard and send money back home to their families and try to live the American dream. I think we can do a better job at assimilating this demographic of people into our economy and into our market on the local level, and I think that's the way to go. So as I said, resources, whether it be time away from your jobs on the streets of New Bedford or Acushnet, it's time and it's resources. And the local municipalities, by doing such things, would just simply drain the resources on the local level, and I don't want to see that happen. Representative
Koczera, you have 2 minutes to respond.
Police department's doing their job. They're not seeking out, and they don't feel the need to have this kind of legislation. So my view remains the same, that we should probably prohibit the 287G agreements. None of the communities are taking advantage of them. It does take away from the resources that they have to do their job, which is to protect the public safety. That includes everyone, and I think that the police departments do a good job in that regard. So that's my position.
Yeah, we wanted to.
As I've said, my position remains the same. I think we could certainly look at the police department of New Bedford with Chief Koczera and the work that he's doing, not necessarily on this issue, but overall. So I don't want to jeopardize any progress that they've been making. Certainly with the opioid task force in the community involvement with the police, I think they're doing a phenomenal job. So jeopardizing that in any way, bringing the sanctuary cities and the sanctuary issue to that forefront would be nothing but detrimental to our communities.
All right, Representative Koczera gets the next question, and I want to ask you: you've been state representative now for more than 2 decades, right? And New Bedford still has no rail service. We left out of the casino bill, which gave preference to the Mashpee-Wampanoag under a gaming bill that you voted for, and we have no commitment to fund a replacement for the New Bedford-Fairhaven Bridge, which the mayor's been fighting for a long time. Why should the voters in the district return you to Boston?
I think we're making progress with respect to South Coast Commuter Rail. I think that we're going to realize that within 4 years by adopting the Middleborough route, that there's agreement between both cities of Fall River and New Bedford towards a commuter rail. Your other question was pertaining to...
Well, we're talking about, you've been in office now for over 20 years. We don't have rail. We don't have a casino.
And the casino issue is something that I fought for. The legislation that was passed was for 3 regional destination resort casinos. I think where we got short-circuited was with the language that Governor Deval Patrick had requested relative to Native Americans.
But you voted for the bill, though, right?
I voted for the bill with the idea that it would be implemented in a way where the Gaming Commission would give the opportunities for the Native American tribe to pursue taking land in trust, which they did, and then it was reversed by court because they're faced with the Koczera decision. That decision is a stumbling block, and unless there's an act of Congress, which I don't see happening, that's never going to come about. I think that what we're seeing with the opening of MGM just this past weekend and the opening of the Everett casino will give an opportunity for the Gaming Commission to take a look at the southeast region and possibly reopen it for bid. And I think that they should do so. And they should maybe give the Native American tribe an opportunity to accept a commercial license and just give it to them to open. If they're unwilling to do that, then we should put it out for bid again. I don't think it's dead, but it's very disappointing how our region has been treated with the bill. It does represent economic development and jobs for the people in this area, as well as tax revenue.
All right, Mr. Hendrick, you have 2 minutes to respond.
Yeah, so thank you. The rail was mentioned and casino gaming. So with respect to the rail, I'm 35 years old, Barry. I have been listening to the state leadership at the State House talk about this rail that's coming in, down to New Bedford since I was a young boy, okay? Since the early 90s, since Representative Koczera has been elected. In 1988, they've been talking about this. And we still don't have the rail, okay? A large part of my law practice brings me up to Boston. And I know better than anybody that sitting in 2 hours of traffic each way is no way to have a good transportation system. I saw the rail mentioned on some of his literature about his accomplishments, but we don't have it. I just think it's funny for a almost 30-year incumbent to say that he's for a commuter rail, but he's had 30 years, Barry, to get this done. And we're still driving up to Boston, sitting in 2-3 hours of traffic. So I think we need the proper leadership on that issue. And I think it's a shame that these trains are going to be running on gas-powered, well, for the most part, on gas-powered engines. It's 2018. Everything we know about the changing climate and the warming planet should have directed us to get a more progressive approach with this rail. And if I'm elected on September 4th, I assure you that I will fight tooth and nail to get this rail down as soon as possible, because very little progress has been made. As with respect to the casino gambling, any tax revenue that comes in is good for the state. The question is, do we want to balance that against, casinos, that type of vice being introduced into our communities? Before DeLeo came into office, he was, the legislator was against casino gambling, and now they are. And now Speaker DeLeo has 2 casinos in his district. So I think there's a lot of things we could look at as far as leadership on this issue.
All right, let's give...
It's disingenuous for my opponent to go and say that he 35-year-old, 2-year attorney is going to, at a snap of a finger, move the earth up in the State House, especially by attacking the Speaker of the House, to get anything done for our region. The fact of the matter is that there are a lot of people, all the legislative delegation of Fall River and New Bedford, that have been working in earnest on this issue. It's $1 billion just to do the Middleborough alternative that's been proposed by the administration and embraced by both chambers of commerce and both cities' legislative delegation. I think it's just absolutely ludicrous and disingenuous on his part to think that, his going there is going to make it happen. I work every day. The hallmark of my service is I work full-time as a state representative, not part-time, and I will continue to work hard to address the needs of our area, whether it's commuter rail or casinos.
All right, you got 10 seconds, Mr. Hendricks.
10, I thought he had a minute for a response.
What did I say, a minute, right? Got a minute?
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So he just
I'm looking at the sign that says 10 seconds.
Sorry.
Go ahead, you got a minute.
So he's criticizing me for disparaging the current Speaker of the House.
Yeah.
I wish we had some type of leadership to disparage the former speakers of the House, who are full of corruption, who are involved in this probation scandal, who have a litany of issues that should have been discussed. Representative Koczera has done little to reassure people of this district that he's doing everything he can to fight corruption with respect to the speakership, because the last 3 speakers have all gone down in corruption, and I think that is an absolute disgrace. So to say that he's doing everything he can to get the South Coast Rail with the Speaker of the House, I think we first have to address the issue of where our leadership is headed at the State House, because it's certainly getting speaker after speaker who has been acting nefariously up at the State House.
Let me ask you, Mr. Hendrick, you get the next question, 2 minutes. Let me ask you about the train, since we're on that subject. It seems as though the Middleborough route is going to be now the preferred route going forward. Nobody seems to like I know the Fall River Chamber and perhaps the New Bedford Chamber have endorsed this as well, but you talk to people in Freetown, you talk to people in Lakeville, you talk to people in Middleborough, you talk to even Mayor Mitchell here in New Bedford. Nobody seems to want this thing. It's the wrong route. It's going to take too long to get there, and there's a lot of problems that have to be solved along that route in order for this thing to happen. Why bother? Why not take that money and say, rather than a train, fix 24, or give us money for the bridge or whatever that we need to replace here in New Bedford?
There's certainly no question that there's a serious issue with public transportation in this state. As I said, it's 2018. The fact that we don't have a train down here right now is problematic. In the way they're doing it, as you said, through the Middleborough-Lakeville line, it's going to be costly. It's going to take a lot of time. Whether or not we want to put the resources in that direction is up to the current leadership at the State House. But I certainly would be in favor of getting the train down here as quick as possible, getting it down here powered by either renewable energy, not all gas-powered trains. So
you favor proceeding with the Middleborough route then?
I favor proceeding with the Middleborough route if we can get it done on a clean energy initiative. Get it done with electric trains and not gas-powered trains. Like I said, if we're going to invest so much time and money, let's make sure that we're not creating unnecessary greenhouse gas emissions, which has been a climbing issue here in Massachusetts, despite the progress we have made. So certainly getting the train down here under the right circumstances is something I'd absolutely be in favor of.
Representative
So my opponent's talking on both sides of the issue. He's for it. He's against it. He's critical of everything going. He's trying to, reap the benefits on being on both sides. The fact of the matter is, the benefits of commuter rail service, the restoration of commuter rail service to our area will be significant. And if we were to pursue the Stoughton route, which is the preferred route, it would be electrified. It would also, the cost estimates are now over $3 billion. That's like another, big dig project. The $1 billion will be something that the administration, the governor, is on board, no pun intended, and there is support to fund this program. This costs a lot of money, and I think that for an attorney He takes a very simplistic approach.
But the folks who would ride this don't seem to support it. As I mentioned, Mayor Mitchell doesn't support it. Freetown, Lakeville, Middleborough, they've all come out against it. Taunton doesn't want it.
The commute on a good day is 90 minutes now, and increasingly it's more like 2 hours out of Boston. I know, I've been doing it for a long time. I did it in the early 80s when I was working in Boston in the private sector. It's not going to get any better. The congestion on our roads is just begging for mass transit. Mass transit inherently means a cleaner environment. It takes more cars off the roads. Mass transit is the route to go. At some point, the federal government has to step up to fund mass transit for the beneficial effects it will have to the environment. There's no doubt that this is an economic plus to our region to be connected to Boston. That's where all the growth is taking place. That's where all the development is taking place. That's where there's opportunities for people to gain employment.
Mr. Hendrick, you get a minute to respond.
So, you know, 30 years. Representative Koczera was elected in 1988. I believe Ronald Reagan was president when that took place. Okay, and for far too long, for almost 3 decades, we've been hearing about this train coming, and it's not here. And if they're going to do it, they should do it the right way, because if it's going to cost $1 billion, 10 years from now, it's going to cost, you know, triple that to make it all made with renewable energy. So I think doing it right, yes, but doing it right is what's you know, needed here. And we just don't have any type of leadership. We don't have any town halls. We don't have any discussions that were prompted by Representative Koczera to get the community involved and get the community to be heard on this issue, particularly in New Bedford and Acushnet.
All right, I'm going to stay on this topic because it's a very important one, and Mr. Hendrick is correct. We've been hearing about this since we were all kids, right? So, Representative Koczera, and you'll have 2 minutes to answer this, on the train, we have been hearing this for a long, long time. Stoughton was the preferred route. Now we're looking at Middleborough. Do you believe that Stoughton will ever happen, or is this going to be Middleborough, take it or leave it?
No, I hope that we go to phase 2, and I hope we go to Stoughton. But what my opponent just said previously is showing how uninformed he is. We've had hearings. We had hearings at New Bedford Regional Vocational School on the train. We have opportunities, and we've had citizens step up and speak to their concerns about the extension of commuter rail by Middleborough. I don't know if he's put letters expressing his views on it, but for a candidate, it seems to me that you know, he's talking out of both sides of the mouth. He's saying that nothing is being done by elected officials. They are. We've had numerous hearings and briefings and updates throughout, and you can talk to Gene Fox, Fall River, New Bedford, and Taunton, and as a candidate, he hasn't weighed in on this. He's just got 150 signatures to get his name on the ballot, and he's just you know, throwing mud at everything and saying, well, nothing's being done, and he's leading people to believe that just by electing him, it's going to get done. It's not going to get done in a shouting match. It's going to get done from hard work, people reaching a consensus, and that's what we've been doing. We've been doing that as a legislative delegation, not just with Mayor Mitchell, but with all his predecessors going back to John Bullard and Rosemary Tierney and the other mayors of the other surrounding cities. This is a heavy lift. It's $1 billion for transportation, for mass transit. I think it's worth the investment, worth the effort, but nothing is going to happen simply, and the people just shouldn't believe the bill of goods that this guy is saying he had this afternoon.
You get a chance to rebut.
Barry, Representative Koczera mentioned town halls or discussions at VoteTech. I would be hard-pressed to see if he was on the forefront getting the community involved for discussions like that, because I have heard nothing in the decades that I've been living in this district from Representative Koczera on what my thoughts are as a voter and what my neighbors think on this issue. At the end of the day, Barry, when you're going into Boston, and for those of you listening, especially those in the 11th Bristol District, when you're driving up to Boston and you're sitting in 2 or 3 hours of traffic, remember what Representative Koczera has said about how hard he's worked to bring that train down, because it's not there. At the end of the day, no matter what he says, Barry, that train is still non-existent. We're still wasting our time driving up to Boston. So that's all I have to say. I think that the voters can make that decision for themselves on how productive and how effective he's been at getting this train down here.
All right, Mr. Hendricks, you have 2 minutes to answer the following question. You advocate for tuition-free college. Nothing is free. Somebody pays for it. You say that with proper tax structure, it can be done. What do you mean by proper tax structure?
Well, first of all, I'm not for blatant free college. What I am for is affordable public university college tuition. Now, the fact that Massachusetts students are borrowing more money to attend public school than they are to attend private school, that is an absolute disgrace. In the state representative Koczera and the leadership at the House should be ashamed. The fact that that is existing in 2018. I think we could lower tuition. I think assigning the right resources in the budget basically will bring down tuition. I think we should focus more on grant programs and scholarships for disenfranchised kids. Can you imagine being a 15, 16, 17-year-old kid working your rear end off in college, volunteering, doing extracurricular in high school, and doing extracurricular activities, but then at the same time having to take out $30,000 per year to attend a public university? If a public university is over $30,000, it is in essence no longer public. So what does that say about us as a community, that we value education? If we're going to be a state that values education and values the productivity of our students, but as they get older, then we certainly have to fix this problem. Because since I believe 2015, increases on the state public university level has gone up 2.8%. Okay, and the millionaire tax, to get to the point of your question, would have helped along those lines. Obviously, the millionaire tax isn't going to happen now, so we have to find other ways to get proper taxation, get proper revenue. Now, there's going to be a lot of revenue coming in with marijuana and potentially gaming activity. So I think we could certainly assign some of those resources to reducing and making college more affordable. I'm certainly it's certainly a pipe dream to say that public universities should be free. I think they should be affordable. $5,000, $10,000, $15,000. Anything would be better the way it is.
All right, let's let Representative Koczera respond. So you guys up on Beacon Hill have not.
Do I get to respond?
I'm going to let you respond. I just want to kind of frame the question a little bit. The legislature and the University of Massachusetts has kind of been going at it year after year after year. Who's responsible for paying the lion's share of public education? As a result of that, we've seen tuition go up. So what does the legislature have to do to bring that down and control it?
We have to invest more in public higher education, both in terms of the infrastructure on their campuses and in terms of reducing tuition. But, my opponent hasn't even held elected office, and he's flip-flopping. He's already quoted in the Standard Times that he's for free college education. He's embracing the Bernie Sanders wing, and now he's saying affordable. I said before the editorial board of the New Bedford Standard Times that I believe that we have a moral responsibility to make public higher education affordable. Community colleges, state universities, UMass system. I said it's important that people take responsibility and strive to help themselves, that they have skin in the game, that, if you go to buy a home, you have to put a down payment down. You want to buy an automobile or lease an automobile, you got to put a down payment down. You want to rent an apartment, you got to put first and last month's rent. Now, it's a whole new opponent. He's now for affordable higher education, as I said that I was in numerous. So
how do you make it affordable, though? That's the point of the question.
I think we look first at investing in those schools because there is a need to go and do repairs. We're doing it with bonding. I think that you bring technology into the classrooms, but I think the other thing that you do is you take a look at the growth revenues and how much we're going to go and put into K through 12 education and how much we're going to put through higher education, because the costs are becoming astronomical. We got to start halting and cutting some spending in higher ed to direct it towards relief for students so they can afford it. When I went to college, I paid my own way. It was affordable. We have to get back to make it affordable. But my opponent clearly said in the Standard Times that he was for free college tuition. How do you pay for it?
You get a minute to respond.
Well, he didn't answer the question of how he's going to pay to lower college affordability tuition, so I will. One, we can start with the pay that some of these teachers in the tenure system on how astronomical these salaries are. We have Meehan, who's in charge of the UMass system. He's projected to make $1 million. Can you imagine $1 million, Barry? Meanwhile, we have the legislator they're trying to find resources to make college more affordable, but at the same time, they're giving themselves pay increases. In 2017, that was one of the most disgraceful things I've ever seen a state legislator do, particularly in a time where we have education not only unaffordable for college, but we don't have a universal pre-K system. Our kids are not getting the proper education, and it's creating a generation of people who are unemployable and a generation of people who don't have vocational skills. So to give, my opponent talks about what he's done and what he's going to do to make college more affordable. Well, he can start by retracting that pay raise that he gave himself in 2017, which was an absolute disgrace, and all the citizens of the Bristol 11th should be outraged by that.
All right, let's. I'm going to stay with education here for a moment because we have an issue too with high school education. And I'm sorry, K through, what am I thinking? K through 12, thank you. K through 12 education. We hit your wife was a principal for a lot of years, so you understand. Kids get to that middle school level and seem to just lose it. And a lot of folks tell me that they would prefer to see the state make more money available to communities like New Bedford to be able to provide more in the way of vocational and other options to kids. Not all kids should go to college, and not all kids want to go to college, and we're losing a lot of kids that might flourish in a vocational system. Why is the state not recognizing that and putting more money into vocational ed?
It's recognized the problem. They have a Foundation Budget Review Commission that came up with 4 recommendations to address the impacts of local school districts. That being healthcare, special education, that being English language learners and low-income students. We don't have a handle on what the costs are. The cost just to deal with healthcare and special ed is, for this whole issue, is like $1 to $2 billion. We're staring down a possible lawsuit from the Brockton and Worcester school districts because there's disparity in educational spending, and that's against our Constitution. The legislature this year, the House of Representatives this year, voted for $500 million to address the health care costs and the special ed costs affecting the K through 12 system. We weren't able to pass that to the governor. It didn't get adopted by the Senate. It'll be a top priority next year. The governor came to New Bedford Voc. I was there when he said, why not look at a second regional vocational school to serve the whole South Coast? It's a point it's a valid point. We should look at vocational education. Not everyone's going to go to college. The question becomes resources and money, and I think that we have to live within our means. We don't have the so-called millionaires tax to fair share amendment, so we have to live within the growth revenues. This year, our growth revenues exceeded our estimates. We are able to put money into the state stabilization fund, the so-called rainy day fund. We're acting responsibly, but you're not going to get there overnight. These are big undertakings. The legislature, the House of Representatives, has committed to funding 2 of the 4 costs and looking to have a plan that is affordable and phasing in the unmet needs in this area for K-12 education.
And everyone listening. So the projected, a third of the projected new jobs until 2022, a third of them are going to be construction jobs or healthcare jobs. These are professions and jobs that we can train young people earlier on while in high school. We need to put more emphasis on vocational training for the people who do not want to go to college, particularly when we have college tuition going through the roof here in Massachusetts. So what we do, my plan would be to get kids at the middle school aged schooling and get them involved and get them learning about vocational trades, get them learning how to be a carpenter, how to be an electrician, how to work on a wind farm. That's a whole generation of people that could be able to work on the wind farm that's going to go offshore over the next several years, I believe in the 2022 or 23. So investing in vocational training and the people who don't want to go to college, because I represent people from the trades, I represent carpenters, I represent electricians, I represent people who have the skills to have a nice standard of living. And it means a lot to be part of a trade, to be part of a union, to promote union rights, and to promote organization of your work conditions. And I think putting a focus on that will create a whole generation of productive young citizens who will come out of high school and start earning $80,000 or start earning $60,000, $70,000 a year. Can you imagine what that would do to the economy? Because they certainly can't go to college because they can't afford it. And he talks about growth revenues, and he talks about the money he's allocated in the budget for this stuff, but that's projected. Okay, I believe $160 million of that money in that budget is speculation due to the marijuana sales expected revenues and the gaming revenues. So it's all speculative. So you know, there's a serious. I mean, I could go on and on about education and how it affects the local economy in what Mayor Mitchell has been talking about, and hopefully at our next question we'll talk about that. But I think investing in vocational training, because people cannot simply afford to go to college anymore.
All right, Representative Koczera, you get a chance.
There's no simple answers to these questions, but yet he makes it look like it's simple. It doesn't work that way, and the costs for these items are exponential. But we're beginning to address them. It took months of this commission going around before they came forth with their recommendations to fund K through 12 spending, to stop the disparity of funding between school districts, to address the impacts that affect school districts like New Bedford that are so diverse. And I believe that we're beginning to address that. But $500 million over 5 years is not chump change, and will make a real difference, and will begin to close that gap.
All right, we're at the end of our first round, so you guys can take a breath for just a couple of moments. Going to play a couple of commercials, and we're going to come back. We got, believe it or not, only 20 minutes left. We'll ask some more questions, and what I think is a spirited discussion so far. And then we'll get some closing responses from our candidates for the 11th Bristol District, Incumbent Representative Robert Koczera and the challenger Chris Hendricks. Both are Democrats. This race will be decided next Tuesday,
right?
Because whoever wins the primary on Tuesday has no Republican opponent in November. We'll be back in just a moment. Stay with us. You're listening to 1420 WBSM.
That we're right.
And welcome back to the program. It is now about quarter before the hour of 2 o'clock. We have a discussion going on here between the candidates for the 11th Bristol District, Incumbent Robert Koczera and challenger Chris Hendricks, and we're going to continue this up until the top of the hour. And I believe our next question goes with Mr. Hendricks, right? I think so, right? Yeah, because we asked you about the vocational. So I wanted to stick with education, though, because this is, I think, a crucial issue that my audience talks about with me a lot. And they feel as though there should be more vocational options here in New Bedford, whether it be in the middle school. Back in the day, we had shops at Nemandin, right?
For them, yeah.
Yep, and we had shops even at the high school, and that's all non-existent now. And that was a way to introduce students to something perhaps other than the traditional college education. So how do you do it, Mr. Hendricks? How do you find the money? He says that they've been looking at this, there's no money out there. How do you find the money, and or how do you go about reallocating what we spend on education to include more for vocational ed? So
if we're not prioritizing education in the budget, legislators aren't doing their job up in the State House. Plain and simple, Barry. So to get the vocational training into the middle schools, first of all, you'd have to make it relevant. When I took vocational training schools, voc training classes, arguably, when I was in middle school, but it was a printing press class, it was a robotics class, stuff that is not relevant in today's economy, even back then, never mind now. So I think introducing carpentry, introducing electrical, things of that nature, things that are easily teachable as far as a skill set, starting with those types of classes at a young age. I'm talking, like you said, at middle school, and getting these people exposed to the standard of living they could have by being part of a union and learning a trade and being an apprentice. Because if you graduate high school and you want to go to college in Massachusetts, it's very difficult. So I think we're doing a big service by finding the budgetary allowances up at the State House every year. If we're not prioritizing this money for our kids, then what are we prioritizing? So I think it's a clear matter of leadership. Like my opponent mentioned, the millionaire tax is off the table. That would have been absolutely helpful. I think 19,000 people would have been affected. So I think if we can get something codified along those lines, something that's comparable to something that the millionaire tax would have generated as far as revenue, I would be absolutely open to that. And the people of the 11th Bristol can be assured that I will absolutely fight for prioritizing those issues in the budget.
Representative Koczera, is there a way to redirect financing in order to establish some type of new vocational training in schools?
There are certainly ways to think out of the box. There have been discussions on the local level to see how they might be able to utilize better the facilities at the Greater New Bedford Regional Vocational Technical High School, so that you have students in the general high schools like New Bedford High and even Fairhaven High and Dartmouth High being able to utilize and taking certain kinds of courses at the vocational school. That's an avenue that's open. Certainly the community colleges need to work more with vocational schools to offer different kinds of programs and opportunities for students. We have students at New Bedford High School and Fairhaven High School and that applied AP classes, advanced placement classes. We can do the same thing for vocational education. It might be at a different hour, but we can do that. And that kind of discussion is being held. And we'll leave it to those people, the educational administrators, to come up with a model. We'll look to fund it. I mean, we're looking to address the imbalance between school districts on education funding. The House voted this year to commit $500 million over 5 years to address the concerns identified by this special commission looking at the need to revamp school funding formula under ed reform. So the answer to your question, yes, it can be done, but it's not simplistic like my opponent would have the listeners believe. It takes a lot of hard work. It takes a full-time state representative, not a part-time legislator drawing a full-time legislative salary, being a full-time lawyer, and that's what my opponent will be.
Mr. Hendrick, a minute to respond.
Just on that point alone, that is demonstrably false. I've said time and time again, if elected, I will absolutely not practice law at the rate I am now. Will I take a case here and there? Absolutely, because what I do in defending working class people, Representative Koczera, is an absolute passion of mine. So I will just start off with that. You heard my opponent say that he wants to, put the onus on the educating administrators to come up with a formula. We need leadership at the State House, Representative Koczera. We have for far too long, taking a soft core approach on this issue. It's about time. Our kids in the district and our kids across the Commonwealth deserve a lot better than what they're getting now. And it's a matter of leadership. If we don't have the money, you go up there and you fight for it. And I didn't hear my opponent mention one town discussion or one town hall he had to talk about these issues with his constituents. I've been a constituent in this district for almost 2 decades, and I have never got a letter from you. I've never got any type of correspondence saying that you want to hear my issues on this.
Let's move from vocational to charter schools, because there's quite a battle in many districts, including New Bedford, about funding for charter schools over public schools. There's the feeling that the public schools lose out when charter schools get funded. What's your thought on funding charter schools?
First of all, in general, charter schools I think are great. They teach an innovative curriculum. They teach students to think outside the box. And at least in New Bedford, every charter school is doing a phenomenal job. The problem is the funding. Okay, and the problem is leadership at the State House. Mayor Mitchell, who I've talked about this issue extensively, has raised every alarm bell that he can to put legislators on notice that the refunding formula, the reimbursement scheme, is just simply inadequate. When you have the state budget supposed to account for 100% for the first year and then 25% the 5 subsequent years, and they're simply not meeting that budgetary obligation, that's a matter of leadership. So I think, again, prioritizing the fact that, charter schools are great. And we should be encouraging kids in the city to go. My nephew, Jack, and my niece Natalie both go both go to charter schools, and Natalie will next year. But so charter schools in and of itself are great. I just think when you have the public education system, taking a hit because of these charter schools, I mean that just it's a net loss for the people of New Bedford and the people who have to send their kids to these public schools that are just inadequately funded. So I think with the proper leadership and getting the right funds to get the reimbursement scheme back on track, so people can have the option to go to these charter schools. But absent any type of reform in the reimbursement scheme, I think we need to focus on the strength of our public schools and our district schools, because that's a huge issue. And like I said, the mayor has rung every alarm bell he can find with 0 responses from the State House.
Representative Koczera?
Again, my opponent doesn't understand you can't have it both ways. When we did education reform in 1993, there was one aspect of that never got fully implemented, and that was school-based management. That was getting the teachers on a school with the administrators of the school and the parents involved in adapting and innovating within those public schools. And that's where we need to put the focus on, because we cannot afford to have 2 separate public education systems. The concept behind charter schools is to lead the way and present a model, create a model that can be adapted in the public schools. That's not happening. And we're seeing that charter schools want to grow. They want to, I heard Global Learning Charter wants to leave their facilities to get a bigger facility, possibly off of Church Street. There's only so much in terms of resources. We have to recreate public education in Massachusetts. And we have a model to do that, and that's school-based management. That's getting the teachers in the school system, the administrators, and the parents involved towards that undertaking. And that's the approach that I take. I think that is a meaningful approach. We've made strides in funding charter schools, and we will continue to make strides with the resources that we have available to us. But I think that this guy, he really needs to take a course in economics and realize that he's putting everything out there like a candy man for the people, thinking that he's going to be able to make all these changes. It takes a lot of hard work. It takes full-time representation, and he's a lawyer, and he'll continue to be one.
I'll give you a small economic lesson since you're asking for it, Representative Koczera. 12% of our funding that goes to the public schools ends up going to charter schools. And we have only 4% of our kids attending charter schools. So I'm no economics major, I'm no math major, but I know that those numbers are off. And it starts with leadership at the State House. You know, this reimbursement scheme was set in stone, 100% and 25%, and they're not even meeting that. So that's an obligation that rests upon the state legislature. So if they're not meeting that obligation, it's not on the school-based management system like Representative Koczera talks about. There's nothing the school administrators can do about this. It's a funding issue. And a funding issue always makes its way through the State House. All
right, Mr. Hendricks, you get to give the first closing argument here, if you will. Your first closing statement. Go ahead. You got 1 minute.
To those of you listening, particularly those in the 11th Bristol District in the North End of New Bedford and Acushnet, I strongly urge you on September 4th to vote for new leadership. For far too long, we've had the state leaders up there be walled off from their constituents, particularly in this district. Representative Koczera has done little to hold town halls. He's done little to show his face in the district. Hell, I didn't even know he had a mustache until about 6 months ago. So we need proper leadership at the State House once and for all. We have 2,000 people died last year because of opioids. Meanwhile, they're giving themselves pay raises. I think that's absolutely absurd. We have to prioritize education. We have to make college more affordable. We have to prioritize getting the opioid. I'm a recovering alcoholic. No one understands the recovery process better than I do. And it is woefully inadequate here in Massachusetts. So what we need to do is we need proper leadership for these issues, and they will get that on September 4th when they vote for Chris Hendricks. Thank you.
Representative Koczera with the mustache.
Thank
by
you.
the way. Have you had that mustache long?
I've had it since someone told me when I got elected in 1983 to the city council that I needed to grow up, so I grew a mustache. I've had it ever since.
Since 1983.
The only endorsement I seek is the endorsement of you, the citizens of Acushnet and New Bedford. I will continue to fight for issues large and small, after-school and summer learning grants, while obtaining funding for the local after-school program like I did for 4th and 5th graders at the Campbell, Swift, Ashley, and Lincoln elementary schools. Fighting for senior services, combating the opioid addiction crisis that affects people in all walks of life. I received one of the greatest endorsements I could ever receive. That is from my opponent, who at 6:05 p.m. on October 24, 2017 said, I quote, "I am a very competent and effective legislator. I have heard nothing but positive things about your character and ability as an elected official," unquote. I don't know what has changed in the last 10 months, but I know one thing. I have not, because I will continue to fight for you in Boston every day. Thank you for your endorsement, Chris.
Well, that was before I could get a hold of you, sir. I went to your office hours, which is 1 hour a month, by the way, and you did not show up. So I had to write you a cordial email to let you know that I was running against you.
I think you're off base on that. But,
do you do office hours?
I do office hours, or I have my aide do them if for some scheduling conflict. Heather Sylvia at the Council on Aging in Acushnet will take the person's name down. We'll contact. I meet with people in the morning before I head up to Boston, or I'll meet with them when it's convenient. So accessibility has never been a problem with me. Matter of fact, my biggest gripe is to go and say that you're only around election time. I'm around all the time. This is the guy that's...
I'll give you a minute to rebut. Go ahead.
Barry, 1 hour per month. You can go on his malegislature.com/Koczera, whatever his site is, on that site, and it says he's available 1 hour per month. Representative Koczera, we live in a democracy. Your voters and your constituents deserve to be heard, and you're not listening to them.
That's
1 hour a
unbelievable.
month is woefully inadequate, sir. And I think you know that, and that is disingenuous to say that your aides reach out to voters. I think that is unacceptable.
Unfortunately, we're out of time, guys. Appreciate it. Good luck to both of you, Representative Robert Koczera and Challenger Chris Hendricks on Tuesday, next Tuesday, a week from tomorrow, September 4th. That is the primary election day. Both gentlemen here are vying for your votes in the 11th Bristol District, House of Representatives seat. And again, the winner winner of next Tuesday's primary goes on to become the next state representative, because there is no Republican opponent and in November. So we appreciate them coming in. We're going to take a break for the news. Got the news coming up in just a couple of moments, and we're going to do that. We've got ABC News, we've got the local news, and then we're going to open the phones and give you a chance to review what you just heard here, and your thoughts on what you thought these two candidates had to say, and whether maybe they're impressed with one over the other, or maybe you had a change of heart listening to one as opposed to the other. We'll get the full scoop on that coming up. Of course, the ABC 6 Weather Center forecast is coming up as part of that news package too, and it is going to be mighty hot the next few days, and you want to pay attention. That forecast is going to be very important. And back on the other side for 1 full hour, and then Howie Carr, of course, takes over at 3 o'clock. No Red Sox tonight, so Howie Carr will ride right up until 7 o'clock. And we'll be back after the news. Stay with us. You're listening to 1420 WBSM in New Bedford.